Okay, everybody, welcome back to another class and another episode. I'm joined today by Emily McDermott. She is a co-host with Courtney Kern of Book of the Mouse Club. And I wanted to have her on the show to talk about the podcast and talk about her fandom. And in researching, I found out that she actually was in the Disney College program and actually volunteers at the National Archives. So there's a whole bunch more questions I have for Emily on those things. But let's go ahead and get started. Emily, welcome. Thank you for joining Being a Fan of Disney, the podcast.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for letting me talk about it. It's so much fun to just like get to talk about things that you love.
So let's let's start with your fandom.
Okay.
Where did it start? More or less, what's your origin story to where you started to where you are now, where you host a podcast about Disney books?
Um, I guess origin story. I'm from a very Disney family. Like Disney was a regular vacation we took. Like every other year we would go to Disney. My parents went to Disney in the late 70s. I had asked them this before. Like separately they had both gone in the late 70s, like 78, 79. They went together as a couple for the first time in the early 80s. And then when my sister was born in 89, it started to become, I think her first trip was 1990, and then it was like every 2 years we went to Disney. So like having a Mickey Mouse doll in our house was pretty standard. Mickey ears, I knew what those were since I was a kid. Like I've always remembered having them in the house in the dress up box. Disney movies were a regular lineup. My parents loved, and maybe this is a parent hack if they were available on Disney Plus. Uh, when we'd beg for like, let's watch a movie before bed. I want to watch a Disney movie. My parents would be like, oh, a sing-along song, because they were 30 minutes. But we'd be like, wow, we watched a whole movie. So like that was a pretty standard thing was to watch Disney sing-along songs. Disney Channel was a go-to. ABC Family, watching, Wonderful World of Disney on Sundays. Like so like we were just a Disney family. We loved when McDonald's toys were Disney. Um, but yeah, but I would say where my park fandom comes from was is more so from my Disney college program that I did in 2015. So probably leading up until then, most of my fandom was like just a standard Disney vacation, but mostly movies, is what I had access to at home. But then I had friends that did the Disney college program, and I didn't know that was a thing. Like it's not until like people tell you, and they used to market it a lot differently back then. Like we had an information session on campus. And like I remember flyers being out and around, and they used to have people who were ambassadors who, when they would finish their program, they could be an ambassador on campus to tell you, like, hey, this opportunity exists. Here's what you can do with it. So they used to do like this whole thing. They had swag, there were stickers, and they don't do it anymore. And I'm so sad that I wish they did. Um, but I had, so my co-host Courtney, she did her program a year before me. One of my friends from back home did her program, I think that same year. It's actually funny. I don't know if they ever crossed paths. Um, but they both did it in 2014. So I had two friends that had done it, three friends actually that had done it. I think one of my other friends was 2013 year. So between 2013 and 2014, it started to get on my radar that I was like, oh, this is a thing you can do, where you can get credit. Or I did it after graduation, which I don't think some people know you can do. You can do the Disney College program at any point as long as you are enrolled in college at the time of your application. So if I wanted to go back to school right now, I could do a Disney College program now in my 30s. As long as you are enrolled in a university, you're eligible for these college programs. At least that's how it was when I applied in 2015. I'm not sure if some of those standards may have changed. Uh, so I did actually, I took a gap year. I did a 5-year master's program. So I did my 4 years of undergrad, and I pursued a master's in education at the same time. So I needed 5 years of school. So then I took a gap year. I just did 5 years of college. I'm going to go take a year off and go to Disney. And that is what really being in that bubble. So like I always enjoyed Disney. I liked the parks, but getting to work in the parks and see how they function, um, it's really funny. My phone is still on military time. from working in Disney, and people think, oh, because my boyfriend, we met when he was in the Marine Corps, like, oh, you do military time for your boyfriend? That's so sweet. I'm like, no, no, it's from Disney. Disney function on military time. I was practicing military time before I met him because I knew I needed to get good at it. So like some things have stuck with me, and when you live in that bubble, even for the 6 months, it was only 6 months that I stayed there. It's such an informative experience, and now I'm such a big Parks fan, and and know a lot more about the company, and that's kind of what brought us into the podcasting sphere. Courtney started listening to podcasts and getting into the Disney podcast. We call it the Disney podcast universe because we're all so interconnected. Um, when she started going down for her program, because you want to amp yourself up, you want to really get into it. You're about to go work for the Walt Disney Company. So when it was my turn to go, I asked her. I was driving down, so I had a 17-hour drive from at the time I was living in New Jersey in my hometown to Florida. So I was like, I have 17 hours. Can you give me some podcasts? Like, what should I listen to? And of course, Lou Mangello is the first Disney podcast, WW Radio. And then friends of ours, uh, the Mad Chatters. Those were the two podcasts that kind of got me into the Disney podcast thing. And then I started sampling all sorts of different podcasts. Um, so that's what got us into the podcasting world. And I listened to podcasts all through my college program. And then when I moved home, Courtney was invited on a couple of these shows because she made some friends. She's local. So she runs more into some people who meet in the parks to do things. So she has the opportunity to kind of do a little bit more face-to-face meet with people. So she met up with Jeremy and Derek of the Mad Chatters, and they invited her on one of their shows to play. They do some awesome games, and they call it the Mad Q Party, where they just like armchair Imagineering type things. And so she was just on that, and then she caught the podcast bug. She's like, Emily, we need to do this. We're too much of Disney nerds or fans to not do something. And she caught the podcast bug, and we started thinking about like what can we do that's not already being done. And this was a great opportunity. So she and I met in college, um, now in Maryland, where I'm stationed, but she's local to Florida. And we're like, this is a great way for us to maintain our friendship long distance. We talk every day now. We record once or twice a month. So it's a time that we meet up. And we were like, we both love to read. You get to see my library behind me.
Hmm.
So we were like, that's not something we've seen on podcasts where people will talk about a book, but we're like, but a whole podcast that's just a book club. We thought that was something that hasn't really been done that we had seen. So we're like, why not do that? And we knew we didn't want to touch anything with like news and whatnot. Lots of other people cover that and do that so well that we didn't feel like we needed to fill that need in any way. So we just started doing books, and we started with Marty Sklar's um, Dream It, Do It was our first book. And we've been going 7 years strong now. And so my fandom has changed a lot from just movies and family vacations to big theme park fandom to now history and reading, and making those connections with lots of other people online through podcasting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
That
for
was a
that.
long explanation.
No, it was a very, very good explanation. It's a very, very good introduction. To go back to one of the first things you talked about, the college program.
Yeah.
Um, I'm fascinated by the college program. I didn't know there was a college program either when I was in
Not a
school.
lot of people do, and
Um,
I really wish they had those ambassadors. And now I'm a high school teacher, and even though this will be 9 years removed from my program, I tell my students about it all the time because I don't think they know that like there's
mhm.
these cool opportunities that are very unique outside of like your standard, yeah, like if you're going into engineering, you're going to get an internship in engineering. Like you can go do all these other cool things too. And when I have a student that I know is also a Disney fan, I'm like, do you know this exists? You need to do this.
Yeah.
I've actually connected with a couple parents of some of my students who did college programs because they learned I did a college program. And um, so now, like even students I don't teach anymore, they come back, they're like, my mom's asking about you because they want to know if you saw this Disney thing. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. Uh, we had such a cool opportunity, and I don't think enough pe I mean, people know about it. Disney gets two to, I don't know how many college students, 2 to 5,000 a year that end up in Walt
Okay.
Disney World. There's a lot more college student programs. So next time you're in the parks, look for the name tags. It'll say the university under it. That's
Yeah.
how you know they're a college student. They're on a program. Um, But maybe more people would know or take advantage of it if there was still like more marketing for it outside of
Yeah.
now just social media.
So when you were there, um, the college program, like you were there, you lived on property,
I
right?
did.
Or
Vista
okay.
Way, rest in peace, Vista Way doesn't exist anymore. It's gone.
Um, and so I've also heard that you can debunk this now. You would be the person to debunk it. You know how when Epcot was first being designed
Yes.
before Walt Disney passed away, they wanted to be a living, working city.
Hmm.
Part of the reason the state of Florida agreed to give the Walt Disney Company so much land is based on this idea of the Epcot city that was
Yeah.
never came to fruition. Um, I've often heard that the the company, or I guess colloquially, will say that, well, they did fulfill the Epcot vision because there are people that live on, I guess, what would be considered Epcot property because that's where the international students are living that are working in the international pavilions. Is there any
Okay.
truth to that?
Um, in my experience, I don't know if I can fully say if that's true or not, but from my personal experience, I wouldn't say so. I'm not sure where Flamingo Crossing, which is the current college
Hmm.
housing, is. But where I was, Vista Way, I was behind that property, which is owned, I guess, or rented by Disney. I don't know if it was owned, but like Chatham Square, Patterson Square, Vista Way, they were over by the outlets.
Okay.
So like they were outside of like the archway that you drive through. Like you're not driving
Okay.
through the archway and like there's college housing. I was over by the CVS, Wendy's on Meadow Court Drive. It's Meadow something. Was where I was living. Um, so like it is Disney property, but it's not
Okay.
the Disney property you think of. It's out by the outlet malls,
Okay.
um, on I-4, right off of I-4.
Yeah.
So yes, Disney property, but also not. But I don't know where Flamingo Crossing is now, and I also don't know if there was specific housing just for international students.
Yeah.
If that was different, I wasn't near any international students that I was aware of. I was with all American students as my roommates, so I don't know, or at least all the students I was with were at American universities.
Okay.
I did have one international student from China was one of my um classmate or was one of my roommates, but she was enrolled in an American university, so I
Okay.
don't know how that worked.
The
I would still say they fulfilled the overall promises of Epcot in general in the sense of creating a community about like innovation and
mhm.
thinking like the original Epcot, how it presented innovation and education, that edutainment aspect of like how the world could be better. I think that is still there. The overall themes of Epcot, I think, were achieved, but I don't know about the living parts.
Yeah.
Might be a bit of a
And
stretch.
the like I went the first time I went to Epcot, it was still named Epcot Center. It was in 1988. And so I remember like a lot of the original rides.
Yeah,
those are the rides that I still really associate with
jealous. I would love to
Epcot.
ride Horizons. I have
So
no recollection of it whatsoever. Apparently, it was still there, I think, on one of my first trips, but I was like two. I'm
yeah.
not going to remember that.
And so it's what's interesting about my recollection of everything is that I will get things confused. Um,
Mhm.
like Horizons and World of Motion. I find myself a lot of times I will get those two things confused. And I know that like now that Test Track is being renovated, they're actually going to put more of what World of Motion was.
Yeah, I'm really
So you're going to
excited.
go back into that like kind of like prehistoric era and things like that. I remember things like that, but then also, like Universe of Energy, the Wonders of Life Pavilion was aside from the Imagination Pavilion, which, as you could tell, I'm a huge fan of Figment.
Yeah.
That one was my favorite.
Hmm.
But aside from that, the Wonders of Life Pavilion really stood out to me because I remember like they would show like the goofy sports movies that they made, like Goofy
Yeah.
does football, Goofy does weightlifting, like all this stuff. And they would do that. And I do remember from my early visits because we went in 88 and then again in either 80, I think it was 89. Yeah, the Christmas of 89 turning 90. And I remember kind of a few things from those like being very, very original because the park had not been open. It hadn't been open 10 years at that point. Um, but so within the college program, tell us what your position was in the college program.
So when I originally got hired after your initial application, phone interview, I was hired for character attendant. Um, but I wanted to pursue entertainment. So to get into entertainment, so performing, you have to do a separate audition. So I was hired first as a character attendant, which I distinctly remember in my phone interview. You get to rank, at least I want to caveat this is how it was in 2014, 15 when I applied. Things may have changed by the time you apply for the college program. Um, you would rank different positions. They have like quick service, food and beverage, service, a recreation, merchandise, concierge. Like they had all of the things that you would like rank. And I put character attendant towards the top. And I remember really milking it for all it's worth that being an educator and a teacher, my job is to talk to people from age 7 to age 75. So I would be great with working and talking specifically with guests in line because that's my job. I am trained to do
Mhm.
that as an educator. And I remember the phone person loving my responses to that. So I was hired for character attendant, but then I went to New York in March of 2015 to do my audition. I went to New York City. And I auditioned for entertainment and I got it. I was by the end of, oh, I guess I went in February, end of March. I knew that I got it because it was going into my birthday. My birthday's at the end of March. And I was like, this is the best birthday present ever. I'm told I get to be friends with a bunch of different Disney characters as my job. And it's a really unique position because I was considered global, a
Okay.
global cast member. I was not restricted to any one park or any
Okay.
one um, meet and greet or restaurant, etc. And especially as college program kids, we fill in the blanks. Full-time staff, regardless of position, they get to pick their schedule.
Okay.
There's definitely a selection process, but like you submit your schedules, and so someone might be like in entertainment, they might work town square every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from this day to this day. So they're pretty set in who they're friends with. College program, we're filling in all the gaps.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of fun because I was not in the same place every day. I was in all four parks. I was at numerous resorts. So like you kind of got to be everywhere. I was friends with 9 different characters in my 6 months. Predominantly though, my top three, I was very good friends with Mickey, Minnie, and Donald. Would be my the three I was with the most. Probably followed by friends in the 100 Acre Wood with Pooh and Piglet. And then also sometimes friends with Marie, uh, Turk, Miko, White Rabbit. I really enjoyed hanging out when White Rabbit would invite me for tea with him and Alice in Wonderland. That was really fun. So some really cool experiences getting to be friends with different characters, meet people, and work with different cast every day as well. So I wasn't always with the same people all the time. So I
Mhm.
was meeting full-time casts, other DCP members, just everywhere, and it was so much fun.
So when you say friends with are
Though that
what
is
do you what
the
do you mean by that?
appropriate way. There is
Okay.
only one Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Mickey is Mickey.
Okay.
I was friends with Mickey,
Okay.
which hopefully
So
that
then
is people are picking up on what I'm trying to say here.
yeah.
So there are ways that you talk about how you interact with those characters and how you
Okay.
portray those characters, because the character is the character. I am
See,
not Mickey, but I got to be good friends with him and help him communicate with guests and bring him to life.
See, that alone is I had not heard that before. I've heard people I've read books about it. I've heard people talk about I was this character. I was in this character's costume. I have not heard anybody explain it that way.
That is the way you're
And
supposed to talk about your experience,
and
especially if you are an active cast member, they will say friends with.
and that's fascinating to me. That
It's a
it's
culture.
the yeah, it's a very and to me it's a way that the Walt Disney Company in their theme parks they set themselves apart
Hmm.
that that is like it's very refreshing in a way to hear you say I was friends with Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and to say like there you are not that character, there's only one of those characters, I'm friends with them to help them communicate. Whereas other companies might, it's like you you put on a costume that you look like a mouse in a pizza restaurant and
Yeah.
you just kind of pretend like you are that person or that character for a little bit. Uh, that's
These
a
are
really, really
beloved
cool way that
characters. They're
they,
so ingrained into, I don't even want to just say American culture, because
yeah.
international guests are just as, there's such a connection. And these characters are getting close to 100 years old. Mickey
Hmm.
will be 100 in 2028. So these are characters that people hold very closely, and
Hmm.
Disney, I mean, also rightfully so for copyrights, etc., for their IP, but they're very protective of how
Yeah.
these characters are portrayed. Um, like some people are really surprised, like when Mickey doesn't talk, they're like, so I get asked all the time, oh, you're friends with Mickey. Can you do the voice? And, no, I can't do the
Yeah.
voice. There's very few people who can do it well and do it convincingly. So Mickey always had to save his voice. He was in a lot of parades and a lot of shows. So that
Yeah.
meet and greet, he's got to save his voice a little bit, folks. He's got a long
The,
day. Something
there,
beautiful about the original character meet and greets that Disney's been known for decades. And you can still have very, very good character interactions even when they don't speak.
mhm.
Um, and that is also very ableist. Not everyone can speak or hear.
Yeah.
While it does add an amazing level to that interaction, you can still have. I had incredible interactions, and I never got to speak. Um, and I don't think that diminished every an
Yeah.
interaction as well. It can help elevate it, but I don't think it takes away from it if a character doesn't speak. I know people were upset when Magic Words with Mickey went away, but now it's been years since, and I don't see anyone being
Yeah.
too outraged about it anymore. They're
Yeah.
still amazing. Performers are very well trained. They're very good at what they do. I was honored to be among them for the 6 months I was there, and help bring that magic to life. But you can still have really good character interactions even without the speaking.
Yeah, I agree. Real quickly, one of the best and most impressive interactions I ever had with characters is actually at Hollywood Studios when my son and I were walking over to another attraction. He was a little under 2 years at that point. He's in his stroller. We get stopped by two stormtroopers because
They're
I had
so
made
much
shirts.
fun.
Yeah, and I had made shirts that said like I can't remember what it Rogue something, Rogue Squadron or I can't remember. And it had the Jedi emblem on it and the Rebellion emblem on it.
Mhm.
And so they stopped us to ask why we were wearing those shirts. And I looked down at my son and I could tell he was getting really scared of the stormtroopers. And
Yeah.
on a dime, one of the stormtroopers realized what was going on and took an interaction where if that would have lasted another 10 seconds, there could have been a lot of tears. They
Hmm.
noticed it right away and then basically kind of got out of the situation saying, if you see any, you know, rebellious activity, let us know. And you should probably change that shirt so you don't get more trouble. And then they walked off. And that was one of the most impressive
Yeah.
like experiences to me because one, it was cool. They kept it authentic. it wasn't like, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to leave. It was
Yeah,
behaving
it's
like a
all
stormtrooper would
storytelling.
behave, but also doing it in a way that they were not going to make an experience, you know, bad for a kid. And
Yeah.
in turn, they ended up making the experience really, really cool for me as a fan and as a father. Made me have a lot more respect for all the training and their ability to do those things. So it was really, really cool.
And
Um,
that's a big part of the training I did was reading those types of situations. Um, we did, other than playing a lot of charades, um, it was a lot about it's about body language. Can
mhm,
you, um, especially for characters who do not speak, it's a lot about reading the room. And do you know how to interact with people, both in situations where they might feel uncomfortable, but also maybe in situations where you don't feel comfortable? How do you kind of navigate that and use
mhm.
your space, use your character attendant, use whatever is available to you to do that, but they get so good at it. And it
Yeah,
is all about the storytelling. It's great. Like you don't I get kind of mad a little bit when people are like, I'm going to try to get them to break. They won't break.
yeah,
They are Mickey. They are stormtroopers. What do you
yeah.
mean they're going to break character? They're not character. They are
Yeah.
stormtroopers. They are Mickey. They're not going
Well,
to break.
and it's also if you're trying to, break someone,
Then why are you there?
it might be fun for you. It might be fun to talk about or tell someone, but inevitably there's somebody watching
Yeah.
who, is a kid who's watching. Um, I mean,
Which is yeah, and I'm still
yeah, that,
incredibly um it's so funny now. So like I definitely went through that phase in my fandom where like when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, I want to meet Mickey. And then when you're a teenager, you're too cool for characters. I definitely hit that phase. I always met Mickey. Like that was the thing as a family, like you have to meet Mickey at least once in the week that we're here. You didn't
mhm,
go to Disney unless you said hi to the boss. Um, but then with my program, and since then, I look forward to the most character interactions. Like I have spaces I'm like I have to meeting a character is just as important to me as riding Rise of Resistance.
mhm,
It's just as important as getting on an attraction. They are such an integral part and such a unique part of what Disney does that other parks don't. And bringing these characters live, and that's what people look forward to. You watch this movie your whole life in your living room, and now you get to go talk to them. It's amazing.
yeah,
So I really look forward to that. And I'm funny now because most people I know who are like, I prefer talking to characters who can respond to me. And I think that's why so many people also enjoyed Magic Words with Mickey. Not only because Mickey was speaking, but it is easier to have an interaction if you can speak. That way you don't have to do so much. And there's a difference. So like when I did that workshop for Magic Words with Mickey, your animation changes. When you can talk, you don't have to use your body language as much.
yeah,
Whereas in my roles, I talk with my you see me talking with my hands a lot. I'm also Italian. Um, a lot of it is body language, and everything is about how you are communicating through movement. So some people don't like meeting characters who can't talk because it is different. It is in a way a communication barrier. You are speaking another language. Um, but I'm the opposite now because I've spent so much time with those characters. I have a harder time talking to characters who talk. I
okay.
love meeting the characters who don't. I have a much easier time meeting with them.
So when you go to when you go now and you meet a character, do you ever kind of subtly or when you try to hug them, do you ever tell them like, I used to do this? Like I understand?
So yeah, I will mention I'm getting to a point where maybe I need to stop doing that because it's been almost 10 years. But occasionally like in some locations that I really loved to work. And there have been times where in the last 9 years I've actually run into character attendants that I used to work with
Oh, okay.
and they're like, you kind of look familiar. I'm like, yeah, because we worked together once upon a time. But it's also funny because like you don't get to see my face very much.
Yeah.
So I might remember them really well, but they might not remember me because my I was in costume most of the time. Um, but yeah, occasionally, usually just to my pal Mickey. But I have told Donald a few times, Snake Charming with Donald. So now and then I'll drop it, not every time that I meet somebody, but if I'm having a
Yeah.
pretty emotional day. I want to tell them. One of my favorite locations was Sorcerer Mickey in
Okay.
Hollywood Studios. Loved Fantasia. I love Fantasia. Steamboat Willie is my favorite Mickey. We don't have Steamboat Willie in Walt Disney World. I'm still dying to meet Steamboat Willie in Disneyland. Um, so Sorcerer Mickey is my next favorite Mickey. So I was
Okay.
very excited anytime he invited me before Fantasmic to hang out with him in studios before he went on the mountain. Um, so now and then I've told that Mickey, and it can get emotional. They get really
Yeah.
excited. It is a community. And this happens, I think, for any college program person. Like we, or our most recent episode at the time of this recording, on Book of the Mouse Club, we just read Skipper stories. And one of my
Okay.
friends from my college program was a Jungle Cruise skipper. She only did Jungle Cruise for that 6 months, but it's still such a strong, you build such strong connections and bonds to the people you work with or the characters you play, the stories that you're portraying in your attractions, um, that you want to keep sharing those with
Yeah.
people. And it helps you instantly connect with cast members. And cast members are happy to hear those stories. I know I
Yeah.
was when people would meet with with me and say, I had cast members. Um, I still have it in my keepsake box from my college program. It's that purple box over there.
Okay.
Um, It was Disneyland's Diamond Anniversary, 60th anniversary of Disneyland is when I was working in Walt Disney World. And one day, meeting with Sorcerer Mickey, they gave me a diamond pendant and said,
Oh,
"Hey,
cool.
we're friends on the West Coast when you come to your California home. Thought I'd bring you a gift from home while you're visiting Florida." Like we worked a whole story around it. It was amazing. And I have this little diamond pendant with a note on it from another cast member.
That's really
And
cool.
like that's you it's sharing that bond. I know
Yeah.
friends who work other attractions. Courtney got her start, my co-host at um Space Mountain, and she'll still talk to cast members about Space Mountain, even though she did that 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and you still get excited because you have that shared experience, that shared bond. Like we joke about it's a small world, but like we love those small when our small worlds collide. It's great.
Yeah. So one thing we talked about, and then we'll move on because I want to talk about the National Archives. I want to
Yeah,
talk about the
history.
podcast. Um, you had talked about keys for good character interaction.
Yes.
What are what's your
Okay,
advice for that for people?
couple things. One, especially for your friends who wear the gloves, our four-fingered friends, Sharpies or markers are your friend. You will have a much better autograph with that versus folks who have their full opposable thumbs can work that pen easier. I'll tell you, I used to practice with oven mitts. Like all 6 months, I was practicing my autographs with oven mitts on because most characters you don't get. So Mickey, I kind of look like a Vulcan. Like you're
Mhm.
got weird hand motions and there's a lot of plush. So
Well, and
markers that are thicker tend to look a lot nicer on
and real quick,
your
I'm sorry,
autographs. Hmm.
real quick, you're you're also signing without looking, right? A lot of
Um,
times you can't you
it
are you able to
depends.
see?
I mean, characters, they have eyes. They see. They see
Okay.
just fine. Um, there are moments. So for instance, my friend Piglet, I'll go a little bit behind the scenes on this one. I was friends with Piglet in Crystal Palace. We were meeting with this lovely family. Piglet loves his pink. But then I was given a Princess Pink autograph book with a pink pen, signing with a pink hand, looking through a pink nose. I couldn't see a thing. It was just a wall of pink.
Yeah.
So it does depend. Sight lines can be different for different
Yeah.
characters. The height range I was in, I was fine.
Okay.
My sight was mostly in my sight lines.
Okay.
Um, Whereas other characters, like Goofy, he's a tall guy. He's got to bring that autograph book up to over his nose and up to his eyes pretty high. So it can
Yeah.
Goofy's got a little bit of a harder time maybe signing. Just because he's got a big nose he's got to get around.
Yeah.
So yes and no, but
Okay.
it's not as difficult as you think it is. Once you get trained into it, it's a lot easier. That is something that you can tell in photographs when someone isn't looking just right. So we did a
Yeah.
lot of video in our training. In our first, you will know that some characters are meeting for the first time if you are in Epcot and you are near American Adventure, and there's an
Okay.
alleyway next to American
Hmm.
Adventure. Um, and a bunch of characters are just hanging out. They're meeting for the first time. So that's a cool way also to meet rare characters.
Yeah.
Like Gideon's a popular one. Country Bears hang out, American Adventure. They're harder to meet. Um, they're not always out in like a standard meet and greet rotation. So if you hang around Epcot, keep checking around American Adventure and
Okay.
around where the Millennium Village was way back. It's now just a conference center near Canada. There's like two big gates and a
Hmm.
building. Um, I think between Canada and the UK, not the UK, is the yeah, Canada and UK. Um, if there's characters hanging out there, they're meeting for the first time. They're getting
Okay.
used to being around guests and coming out of the animated world. So we did a lot of training there and meeting guests for the first time, and there's a lot of video, and I learned a lot from watching myself on video of where do I need to move my head and my
Yeah.
arms, especially when signing, like what does that look like?
Yeah.
Because you can tell if someone is a little, if Mickey's not looking at the paper when he's
Okay.
signing, it looks
Okay.
a little weird. So there are some tricks to it. But that's the first thing. I know a lot of people, a big part of why they meet characters, they want the autographs, maybe on a pillowcase, on a frame. But if you want your autographs to look good, a Sharpie or a thicker pen that's easier to hold. They've got bigger hands than us, folks. They got to be able to hold it.
Yeah.
Princesses, they're fine with a standard pen, but everyone else, those hands are a little bit bigger than ours. So I first have a thicker holding, even if it's a Crayola marker, those are great too. But if it's easier to hold, like think about a
Okay.
toddler trying to learn how to write. We give them the thick crayons and a thick pencil, same thing. Um, and have something to say. Don't wait for Mickey to say something to you. Have something to say that can be about the set, that can be about um, something you're wearing. If you have a birthday button, play off of that. Hey, Mickey, it's my birthday. I'm so excited to see you. Or you go up to Mickey, Mickey, I just saw Donald and he was chasing Chip and Dale down Main Street because they stole his popcorn. Just saying something suddenly that character is going to have a lot to say back to you.
Yeah.
And if you can help facilitate that, and a lot of the meet and greet locations have a lot to work with. So like my friend Donald, Charmin Snakes, bring that up. Or you meet Goofy beforehand. I went up the last time I was there, I said, Donald, Goofy says it's your fault that he crashed through that a cage and like crashed his motorcycle. I don't know how I started this. They started fighting with each other. It was awesome. Suddenly, Donald marches over there and has this whole out with Goofy. So now me and Goofy and the family Goofy was meeting with, we're all in this interaction together. So if you can just something, if you say
Yeah.
something first, your interaction is going to be a lot better than you waiting for them. But it's also totally okay that if you just want a hug, you can do that
Yeah.
too. But if you want to really see these characters come alive, it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. It can just be like to maybe a princess, I just watched your movie. I love this song. Suddenly it becomes a much more integrated
Yeah.
interaction and much more meaningful. Like, I know you love Figment. Just being like, hey, I gave an idea to Dreamfinder. Did you get it into the Dreammobile yet? Did it make it
Yeah.
there? Just say something or ask a question. Mickey, what's your favorite color? Suddenly, it's a much better thing. So if you have a question or something to say that you can get that interaction started, it'll be much better.
Okay.
And bring a
Um,
Sharpie.
so then, and I'm jotting down notes for our rapid questions as you talk
Oh
from some of the
goodness.
things that you're talking
I've
you're
heard
saying.
about these rapid questions.
The so the next thing I want to talk about, you work in public schools,
Mhm.
but you volunteer at the National Archives.
Yes.
And so what do you get to do at the National Archives?
I get to do some fun things. So like I said, I am a social studies high school teacher. Government and politics is the main class that I teach. I also
Okay.
teach LGBTQ studies, which is very cool that I have the opportunity to do that. Um, but I got into the National Archives when I was at University of Maryland. During one of my history classes, just someone from the archives came in to talk about like internship opportunities and things. And I was like, that sounds pretty cool to talk about the Declaration of Independence and whatnot. And they had a number of different internships, like with PR, planning, like event planning. But they also had an education team, and I was a
Okay.
dual enrolled student going for simultaneously my master's in education. So I was like, oh, that'd be perfect. I get to talk about history and also kind of look at education in a different way than a classroom education. It's funny, they also call it public education, but it's not public education as in like school systems, but how you educate the public in like a
Hmm.
museum setting, which was a whole nother degree that I didn't know you could pursue. I might have gone that track if I knew that a little earlier, but I love teaching. So I ended up there in 2013, the summer before going into my senior year. And I just had loved it so much that I got to be in a museum interacting with guests. It's, I guess, kind of similar to Disney, where like you just talk about things that you like. You talk
Hmm.
about history, you talk about, and there's people there who they're strictly there to see the Declaration of Independence, but there's so much at the National Archives that you get to see. Um, but like you can find something that everyone enjoys. Are you there just to see Declaration? Great. Let's talk about why that document's so important to you. I was able to show people, fun fact, National Archives has one of the largest comic book collections in the nation because there was a congressional um, investigation
Hmm.
into comic books' influence on young kids. The same way we've like looked into video games and like all these things. How does that impact health and well-being and violence in young people? They did the same thing in the 50s and 60s with comic books, and they have like first edition Batmans and first
Yeah.
edition Mad magazines. They have a huge collection of comic books. So when I had kids that looks super bored, they're like, "Oh, paper." I'm like, "Do you like comic books?" And I showed them the
Yeah.
comic book collection that we had, and they were like, "This is amazing." So I just got to interact with guests. I was on the museum side. I helped put together, in my internship, I helped put together activities for family days, for education workshops with teachers. And then I just didn't want to leave. I had a great time doing it. I had another year in College Park, and College Park, Maryland is on the Metro line, on the same color Metro line as the National Archives. It was like 4 or 5 stops. So it was very easy to get to. So I would just keep volunteering like 2 or 3 times a month and give tours. And that's what I do now is I mostly give tours or I'll be in the museum when we have big events like 4th of July. I was there for about 10 hours. I was there a long time, 4th of July. Um, and then other events, we do sleepovers. You can do a sleepover at the National Archives and sleep next to the Constitution, next to the Declaration, have your Nicolas Cage moment, and sleep in the museum, night at the museum,
Yeah.
archive style. So I'll do a lot of those because I work full time. So anything that's in the evenings, they do a lot of talks with historians that they'll broadcast. If you're not local and you're listening to this, follow the National Archives YouTube channel. They stream everything that they do. So if you want to hear historians talk, share things about their books or research, all of those things will end up on the YouTube channel. So I'm an usher there. You might catch me on some of those, passing microphones to Q&A.
Okay.
I just do whatever they tell me that they need help with. The team has been great, maybe because I've been there now for 11 years. Um, and they know that I work full time. They've been really great with me being as flexible as I can, as I'm not a regular volunteer where I have a set day or time that I'm there, but they know for the big events they can count on me for being there when they need like a bunch of people.
Yeah. So
Really
as
fun.
full time and only being able to do certain events at the archives, uh, you just reach out to them before and say, "Hey, for this, I'll be able to be there," or
Yeah, we have a whole online system for signing up for stuff. I
okay.
forget it was a Better Impact, I think is the program we use. So they like upload all of the possible things you can volunteer for in a day. And there's volunteers for lots of things. I think a lot of people don't realize if you want to get into this kind of stuff, check with your local museums, check with your libraries. We have volunteers who only do research. We have volunteers that only help people with like family trees and genealogy. They don't want to
Okay.
deal with the public. I'm on the side where I deal more with the public. There's people who do transcription projects. There's a big project right now of just we're losing the art of people being able to read cursive. So
Hmm.
there's a whole thing where I think this one you might even be able to do from home online. if you want to be a volunteer for the archives, but don't live as locally, um, where they'll just send you some digital scans and they ask you to read the document and transcribe it just so that they can have a
Oh, okay.
transcription of it. And that's for lots of reasons, not only just for not being able to read cursive, but also helps with accessibility because then you can have text to
Yeah.
speech things if you have it typed out. Um, so there's all sorts of different projects. People putting together keywords. We're digitizing stuff all the time, and we need people to put the keywords together to make it searchable. So there's people doing all sorts of stuff. And there's a big intern network. There's even high school interns that
Okay.
can wear there. I will say it is an unpaid internship. We're not going to get into the politics of that, but it was an incredible experience. I loved it. I'm still there 11 years later, and I
Yeah.
just like getting to talk about history. I got a degree in history, so I want to talk about it. I want to be around it. I want to engage people. I think civic education is the most rewarding thing that I've fallen into. Um, I love teaching civics. I think it's incredibly important. So I love that I also get to do that in a museum setting. And I've met some really incredible people from all over the world who want to see our Declaration, our Constitution. And it does put some things in perspective sometimes of
Yeah.
you get that moment. Like when people, I've read stories from like cast members, like you're having a bad day at Disney as a cast member, and then you get that one guest who just makes you remember like people travel from all over the world to go to Disney World. Well, people also travel all over the world to come to Washington, D.C. or to come
Yeah.
to Memphis. And so you can have that moment where you're like, wow, people actually, I live in a cool place. And I love
Yeah.
having those humbling moments as well in the museum for me.
Yeah. You mentioning Memphis. I mean, the top two houses that are visited usually are the White House and then Graceland. Those
Nice.
are those are always like top two, three, houses visited in the United States.
I
Really,
will say it's
really,
probably a little easier to get into Graceland than the White House. A little easier,
yeah,
but still worth it.
I
Graceland was awesome. I loved Graceland. I went once during a regular time of the year and then I went at Christmas. Oh, so cool.
see. I've driven past in Christmas time to see the lights. Uh, and I think, excuse me, we've been here a while in the area a while now. So when we first moved, we probably went to Graceland, three or four times, if not more, when people would come visit. And so now, like when we go back, it's sometimes we don't go to the house. Sometimes we'll go
Yeah.
to like the exhibits and different things. Like you mentioned a couple years ago, I think it was 2021, was the Disney Archives
Yeah. So that's how I
had
ended
had
up
an
there around
exhibit there.
Christmas time.
Yeah.
I went to go see that exhibit.
Um, so I do want to transition because the original reason I reached out to talk to Emily was to
Yeah.
talk about Book of the Mouse Club. And
Yay.
so and now we're like an hour into it. So now
I
we'll
mean,
talk about
fandoms have lots of aspects
it.
to it. That's
Yeah.
what makes it a fandom.
So where did the idea come for I'm sorry, you talked about where the idea came from, but kind of how did you flesh out what type of topics you're going to cover, what type of books you're going to cover on the podcast.
So they do have to be Disney or at least Disney adjacent in some way. So for instance, we knew that there was a lot out there. And it sounds funny, you're like Disney books, but then you remember Disney has
Hmm.
publishing. They own actually a bit of publishing. I have a friend who works with Disney Publishing and you kind of forget. It's almost like how you forget how much Disney owns. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
they're in sports, they're in ESPN, they're in Discovery Channel, they're in so many things. Disney's also in publishing. There's a lot of books out there. And not only from Disney Publishing, Theme Park Press is another publisher we've done a lot of coverage from, as well as people who have independently published as well. We knew there was a lot out there. And Courtney and I both love to read. When we met in college, we were TAs for English 101 together. She was an English major. I was a history major who just had a really good relationship with my English 101 teacher, and she was looking for TAs. The other TA we worked with, he was a pre-med major. So it was an interesting group of us working together. And we found that we liked Disney and we liked to read. And that's what we
Hmm.
just kept talking about. And that's what Courtney and I have fueled our friendship on was books and Disney. So when she got the podcast bug and was like, I think we should do this. that's what kind of brought us to books. And we knew that we weren't going to run out of stuff. We knew that there's plenty of books that we're on season seven, which we do our seasons by calendar year. So we're in 7 years in um, to this podcast. We're like, wow, we're still not out of books to read. So we'll do anything that's Disney. So we started a lot with memoirs and a lot with Disney history, which is pretty like seems obvious. But then we also went to like fairy tales. Let's read the original Grimm's fairy tale for Rapunzel and compare it. We haven't done that one yet. I want to. Or Hans Christian Andersen, Little Mermaid. So we've read a lot of fairy tale favorites. That's what we call that series. To compare what did Disney do with this. So we love reading classics. We've done like Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Treasure Island. So we'll read some of those. Um, so I think that's more of what I mean by Disney adjacent is you might not
Yeah.
think it's a Disney book, but Disney's done something with
Yeah.
that story. So we've done a lot of fiction. I know Ridley Pearson, you've talked
Hmm.
to. We've talked to him as well. I think around the same time. I think I saw that you talked to him about Cautionary Tales. That's
Hmm.
what we had him on for. We'd love to have him back to talk more about Kingdom Keepers. So we also read some fiction, pretty much anything, but it has to be Disney adjacent. We've unfortunately had to turn some authors away who've reached out to us about other books. Um, we are trying to stay in the Disney realm,
Hmm.
even though there's a large breadth in there of what we can cover. Um, I just think some publishers they try to still contact us about other books that they're publishing, which are wonderful, and I encourage people to check them out. But we are trying to stay in the Disney
Yeah.
realm of things. But we'll cover anything really in there about Disney. And we have guest readers. We started author interviews in our first season. That was a little scary. We were like, how do we like ask someone to be on a show to talk about their book?
Yeah.
It sounds easy, like, oh yeah, just email them, but like it was really intimidating to do.
Yeah.
We're two people out of Maryland and Florida that are in our first season of a podcast, how we're going to convince an author to come talk to us. And now we're at a point where we're getting emails all the time from authors who want us to promote their book. Like sometimes we're asking them, but a lot of times people are now coming to us, which is awesome. But our schedule gets a little tight. That is something that's a wonderful challenge to have with our podcast is um, fitting as many books as possible in a year because you have to read the book. So there's a
Yeah.
lot more prep. All podcasts take prep. I'm not trying to say we have a lot of podcast friends. All podcasts do take work that you don't see in the finished product, but we do have to make time to read this book, and we'll get books sometimes that are 400 to 500 pages on top of teaching, on top of Courtney's job. Courtney's also in grad school right now, so like she's also doing her own
Yeah.
work. So we've dialed back. This past season has been very strictly one book a month to help accommodate with a lot of things happening right now in our lives. But like COVID, we were doing like 4 books in a month when we were
Okay.
shut down because there was not much else to do. So it fluctuates. We're normally one, definitely one a month. Our norm used to be around 2 episodes a month. Um, so that's been a lot of fun, but it's also been a lot of reading. Our TBR list is very, very long. But we love
Yeah.
that. We know that there's plenty out there. Disney is constantly publishing things. I've had to expand. Again, you don't see this, but my bookshelf is behind me on the Zoom. I've had to expand my library because I ran out of bookshelf space from all the books from the podcast. Um, and there's even more on my Kindle. So like there's so much to read. And we're
Yeah.
that's what we wanted was what is something that we know we can maintain and that there'll always be something to pick from. We're not going to run out of. And here we are, 7 years later. Over, if you go back to our episode 100, if you want all the stats, we've read over 100 books in 100 episodes.
Okay.
So here we are. We're still going.
So have you ever, when you're preparing or deciding what to do an episode on, have you ever either started a book and then halfway through thought, maybe let's revisit this later. It's not, we're not going to do an episode on this, or ever finished a book that you were planning to do an episode and then decided, hey, maybe we need to shelve this for a little bit for whatever reason.
No. If we picked the book and we read it, we did an episode on it. There have been times where Courtney and I have like a running list of like it's just a Google Doc of books and book titles. Um, we make a new document for every we call it our planning document where we literally have a calendar of like what books are hitting which months.
Mhm.
And we'll just be like, what are books that we know we want to do? And we'll just keep a list of them. And there's books that Courtney's read that I haven't, or vice versa. So we have hit some points where we're like, hey, I want to do this book, but Courtney's read it. that I haven't, or vice versa. Um, so that kind of thing, but nothing that we've started and then went, let's do this another time. There's been a book once or twice, particularly if we're interviewing someone where we've had to do the interview earlier than when we plan to drop it just because of scheduling. So we have
Hmm.
done that. But now when we commit to a book, but we do look for things like, is there an anniversary year for a movie that maybe
Hmm.
this will like, so we are planning to do hint, hint, National Treasure book later this year because National
Hmm.
Treasure in November is celebrating 20 years. So we're colliding my fandoms, my archives life and my Disney life are coming together. I'm so excited about it. Um, so we're doing that one in November. So like we'll look for anniversary years if we can make that line up. We try maybe to be timely more so with that, or like Disneyland is going to be coming up on another big anniversary, what,
Yeah.
75 next year? So we
Yep.
might dive into a lot of Disneyland type books, probably in that anniversary year. For the Disney 100, we did quite a few books that were based on that, talking to Marcy Carricker Smothers about some books that she published for that. So we try to be timely, maybe, of stuff that's going on. Um, but otherwise, a lot of it comes down to scheduling. If we're trying to meet with an author or have guest readers join us,
Yep.
they'll be like, I'm available in April. And we're like, great, that's going to be April's pick. So that's a lot of it, what it comes down to. Or some books we have had to push where we'd love to talk to somebody, but just because of scheduling, we were hoping to do it in September, but now it's going to be in February.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
lot of it comes down to scheduling.
Right now is as we record this is D23.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, so
the
excited.
the ultimate fan event. It started today. They one thing that they do at D23, I know there are there's always a ton of announcements for movies. I think the Marvel presentation is tonight. There will be presentations on the parks. You always get a lot of announcements about the parks. During D23, do you also follow the some of the announcements and the events at D23 and let that kind of shape maybe where you'll go with the podcast? For instance, like let's say there is maybe there's an announcement about the character behind me and about the ride behind me.
Yeah.
If would then because that is kind of in the public space now,
Mhm.
would you then look for books to talk about maybe the Imagination Pavilion or the making of the ride or even Captain EO or something like that?
Sure. Pretty much anything that catches our interest if we can find a book. The hard part has sometimes been finding a book.
Hmm.
Like for instance, Courtney and I are dying, or at least I am. I'm dying to talk about Schoolhouse Rock, but we haven't found
Yeah.
a book that we can do with Schoolhouse Rock. So finding books to match things. D23 also has book announcements.
Hmm.
I believe there is going to be a panel with DDA Getz, JB Kaufman, and Ted Thomas have a new book coming out um, that I on El Grupo, I think.
Hmm.
Kind of a supplement to the 2009 documentary with new research. So I know like that we pay attention definitely to the book announcements as well. And put those down. But yeah, pretty much anything. We're pretty freeform. We're just like, oh, this looks interesting. I want to read it and talk about it. We'll try to line up, I guess, with some anniversary stuff, but it's going to depend. But like we're already booked out for the rest of this year. We're booked through
Yeah.
February. So
Okay.
at the same time, all these announcements might come out, but we've already planned what books because again, the reading time, especially if we're having guests
Yeah.
or authors, and as our podcast has developed, we actually do a lot more guest episodes now than we do of just me and Courtney. Like it's actually really funny when it's just Courtney and I. We're like, whoa, it's just the two of us. It's been a long time since it's been just the two of us. Whereas like seasons one, two, and three, we had a couple interviews, but they were still mostly just the two of us. And now it's predominantly us talking to other people, which is lovely, and we love that.
Yeah.
But that being said, it's kind of harder to be spontaneous
Yeah.
because we plan it all out. We'd love to get to a point maybe back to having two or three books at a time, but lives have developed and changed and we have other responsibilities. So
Yeah.
1 to 2 books is kind of the max we can do in a month. For us, it comes down to a lot of scheduling. So I'm looking forward to seeing what D23 has to say. But if we want to tackle it, it might be 3 months down the line before we do, just because we're booked
Yeah.
out already.
Yeah. Um, so I do, dear, as I said, during our conversation, I now have a running list of now 6 or 7 rapid questions.
Oh gosh.
Before we
Okay.
get to those, is there anything that I have missed? Anything we didn't touch on? I wanted to talk a lot more about National Treasure and the
I
accuracy
love
of
National Treasure.
National Treasure.
I'm
We
so
talked before
hoping
we were recording.
I'm
Um,
so hoping that that franchise comes back. I show it every year in school. I could probably recite the first movie from memory from start to finish at this point. Because as a high school teacher, when you show the same movie in a class, that means I'm showing it 3 or 4 times in a
yeah,
day
yeah,
of the same scenes 3 or 4 times in a day over that course of a week. So I'm very, very well versed. I love National Treasure. Think what you will of Nick Cage. I thought he crushed it in that film. Um, and it made people excited. As someone at the National Archives, I wasn't there in 2004, but I talked to people that said after that
yeah,
film, there was a noticeable increase of people coming to
yeah,
that museum. And the National Archives has done a lot. As an agency, their primary purpose is not to be a museum. Their primary purpose is to preserve documents.
yeah,
I
yeah,
affectionately call us the filing cabinet. That's their primary purpose, is
yeah,
to maintain records to have out in public use for the government to use. But after that movie, suddenly it was like, the museum's important. A big part of how do you get people to interact with their history and know that these documents exist for them to see and to do research with or whatever they choose with is to get people to come here.
yeah.
Um, and hearing from people who work at the archives when that movie came out, we show it every year. The National Archives does like a free showing event
Okay.
where you can just come to our theater and we'll just play it. We play it during bedtime for our sleepover events. We'll play National Treasure, and people are so excited to watch National Treasure in the archives. It's very
Yeah.
cool. Um,
Yeah, that would be a cool experience.
but it put the
Well,
archives on the map. So like I can debunk a lot of stuff that's in it that's not true about the archives. But we love it because it
yeah.
made people recognize like you can go see, like, did you know you can see that document 365 days a year? 64. It's closed on Christmas. Um, like it's there. You can go
Yeah.
see it tangibly. And don't forget about the Constitution. That one's there too,
We
not just the Declaration.
the I actually did yesterday saw a I guess it was a rumor, I don't know, that there the third movie possibly is in development and kind of a
Yeah, I'm hoping.
potential like plot or not
So
full
I'm
plot
really,
but kind
really
of
hoping D23, like there's a couple things I'm hoping get announced, and that's a big one for me, is I
yeah.
want to hear if that one's definitely coming. I'm really hoping there's an announcement about bringing back. And I know we're in this like time period of reboots of either remaking films or adding sequels, but I'm for it on this one for sure. I would love to see like what is on page 47 or sorry, was it 4751? I forget. He asked him to check that page number
Yeah.
in the book. And I'm like, we got to know. It left it a perfect place. Why would we not have a film moving forward about what is that? I think it was page 47. Um,
Now now
so I gotta know.
maybe now maybe National Treasure will be maybe that will be
Manifesting it.
the movie or the family movie night that we watch on. Maybe that will be the movie we watch in the next few weeks
And
now
even my
because
kids still
I am
enjoy
thinking
it.
that
My Gen Zers, my Gen
yeah,
Alphas are starting this year. Terrifying. Um, that I still show it and they're like, oh, a movie. And then they get into it. It's a good movie. It's got action, it's got history, and it just piques your interest. And suddenly kids are asking me questions like, is that actually true? And I'm like, well, partly. And then we talk about it. And then it
yeah.
leads them down new things to explore. And it's a fun movie and creative in how they tie history and science and mythology together.
You know, I'm I have an idea.
Okay.
Maybe you should develop a class on National Treasure and you could have people watch the movie and then have discussions about here's what here's what actually would happen. here are the things that like are accurate, here are the things that maybe, they took some liberties with and everything. That would be a pretty fun conversation. That would be a fun thing to
So there
or
are
that'd be a
some
fun
people
thing to
who
do.
already do that. Um, I don't know if they focus so much on the history. I know they do talk a lot about the science.
Okay.
But if you are interested, it's called The National Treasure Hunt. They're a podcast. They also wrote a book about National Treasure where they really dive into all of those intricacies. I think they mostly focus on the science. I haven't read their book yet. I actually met them at the National Archives. They came and did a whole presentation about ciphers and the science around like hidden invisible ink and stuff. It was very cool. The audience was super engaged. And then we watched the movie after. So that was awesome. Hoping to get in contact with them. What that their book is what we're planning to read later this year.
Okay.
So hoping to set up a time to meet with them, either during our reading or after. So there are some people out there already doing it, but I think that could be there's a way I do see something in there with the history of, Mason, like
Yeah.
who are the Masons? Why is that a thing?
Yeah.
Maybe more of the history side. But
Yeah.
again, the fandoms, there's people out there who love this stuff and they're both scientists by trade. This is just something they love to do is they fell in love with that movie and they made a whole podcast about it and wrote a book.
Yeah.
You did the same.
Any
It's awesome.
anything else that we've missed before we get to the rapid questions that you could think of?
I don't think so. Just fandom is fun. As long as you guys are, I did get to read your book and I'm super interested in the research you do is so cool about uh
Thank you.
yeah, like group behaviors. I'll throw out there, I'm a Philadelphia Eagles fan, so like there's probably a lot you could say about us. Um, but there's a lot about fandoms, and I love seeing that fandoms are cool again. I don't know, things that I think people used to get made fun of. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's something that's changing. Maybe we're seeing it, with the Swifties or whatnot, of people used to get made fun of for their fandoms. And now maybe with social media, give or take what its pros and cons are, it does allow you to connect with people. And, being a fan or being a nerd or
Hmm.
something is cool again. Or
Yeah.
at least I'm seeing that in my experience. Like I don't hide so much anymore that I love Disney. I tell people I have a podcast. I do go to the parks once a year. Um, or like I am a big Taylor Swift fan and know that there's billions of them
Yeah.
around the world. So I just love seeing that people are celebrating fandoms, people are studying fandoms. That's really cool. And just be
Yeah,
safe out there, everybody.
we actually I'm have the honor of working on a third edition of a fandom book with other authors that um we actually have talked about now because I'm one of the co-authors, talked about Disney fandom, and
Mhm.
that will now be in the book, and have talked about um the phenomenon of what Taylor Swift did to the National Football League last year
Yeah.
with her attendance. I don't think the thing that fascinates me is she significantly impacted, I should say, sorry, significantly increased viewership of the National Football League. And there's
Hmm.
two things that I don't think people take or appreciate enough. One, the National Football League is the most popular or second most popular or in the top two or three most popular leagues in the entire world.
Right.
To be able to significantly increase attendance, or I'm sorry, television viewership of what is a top two or three most popular league in the world, I don't think people kind of appreciate enough or maybe understand the like, just the statistical significance of or the how you are able to do that.
Hmm.
Um, it's just completely fascinating what she was able to do just by attending games and like it is incredible. It's a that's a whole other conversation for another time, but it's incredible like
Yeah.
the things. And so it is nice getting to your point about fandoms. It is nice to see um all of the like people celebrating their fandoms
Yeah.
and not kind of not being, as you said, not being made fun of for them or not being picked on for them. So that is very, very nice.
Yeah, like I'm a proud Disney adult.
Yeah.
And I'm
It-
gonna own that. My mom's been a proud Disney adult for most of her life. Um, and she's had an easier time maybe expressing that. She's been more confident than I have maybe at moments. But that was a big thing about my Disney college program was it let me really sink into that fandom in a safe space with other people who are in that fandom. Um, I mean, for sure, there are definitely people who work at Disney. Walt Disney World's the largest single site employer
yeah.
in the state of Florida. I think maybe even single site employer in the country. Um, so there's definitely people who work there because those are available jobs in the area, but most people who work there because they were drawn to Disney
Yeah.
or something, or even if they weren't, they find something that they love. Or even people who are like, oh, Disney adults, and like, you like Star Wars, you
Yeah.
like Disney too. Maybe certain aspects of it, but there's so much entry points into Disney that be it sports, video games. Disney video games are incredible. I am not a gamer. Um, but my boyfriend is. He would not classify himself as a Disney adult, but he does enjoy some of the video games that Disney has brought out, particularly the Star Wars ones. So like there's an entry point for everybody, which is what I think is so cool. And obviously it's got some staying power. The company's been around for 100 years. It's a
Yeah.
fandom that's just as old as sports.
Yeah.
It's not a new thing, which is crazy to think about sometimes. To think that Disney's 100 years old, like that's insane.
Yeah. One thing I like to do in the class is have students, I'll tell students, okay, leave the class today and try not to interact with Disney at all for the rest of the day and tell me how long it lasts. And most students, when they come back the next week and we're talking about it, they say it lasted 5 or 10 minutes, like
Yeah,
because
you don't
of
realize.
various things. Like our for one, our university has a lot of its athletic events on ESPN Plus, the streaming service. I'm
Yep,
like, well, there you go, right there. Like
Disney.
as soon as you turn that on. So um
University
all
of
right.
Maryland, we've got statue of Kermit the Frog. So every time I
Really?
walk past Stamp Student Union, yeah, Jim Henson is an alumni of the University of Maryland. So outside
I
of the
did not
student
know that.
union, yeah, my student teaching, I student taught at the high school Jim Henson went to in Hyattsville at Northwestern High School. So I got to student teach in his high school. It's not the same school. It had been refurbished and
Yeah.
rebuilt since his time. But yeah, he's a native to Hyattsville, Maryland, which is the next town over from College Park. He went to University of Maryland. So did his wife. So there's a lot of Muppet pride at the University of Maryland. There's a statue
Oh,
of Kermit on our campus. So yeah, it couldn't
that's
escape Disney there either.
that's really,
At the
really
time, I don't
cool.
think
Yeah.
Disney, I forget when Disney acquired the Muppets. But yeah, they're everywhere. We're very
Yeah.
proud. Every time I'm at the parks, Courtney and I, we joke that we have to go to Muppet 3D because we have to pay homage to our favorite alumni.
Yeah. That's very cool. Huh. Yeah, I mean if the class were taught at the University of Maryland, you could teach it
Oh, if there
right
was a Muppet, I maybe that's the
right
class I gotta make.
outside
I gotta
that.
make a Muppet history because all Muppets got started in the Washington, D.C. area. Um,
Okay.
with Sam and Friends was his show that he did on cable TV in the local DC channels.
Very, very cool.
All got started in
Um,
Washington, D.C.
See, there's a whole other topic that could be like an extra 45 minutes, but we'll get to the rapid questions because I
Okay.
told you
Oof.
I gave you a time
I
limit that
knew these
we're
were
we're
coming
rapidly coming up
because
on.
I did listen to a couple of your episodes. I have listened to your show and also I read your book. So like I know this was coming and I'm like mentally preparing.
Okay.
Ready.
So most of these are about the parks.
Okay.
I have three that are kind of based on our conversation.
Okay.
So first, we'll start with and when I'm asking, the first one's going to be favorite park. You could say from your particular experience, you could say this could be as a fan, this could be as when you were with the college program, your
Okay.
favorite one to work. It doesn't matter. You decide, and you can explain if you want. You don't have to explain if you don't want. Favorite
Okay.
park.
Uh, I'm gonna say Magic Kingdom. Very, very, very close with Hollywood Studios. Um, but I think it's Magic Kingdom just because of my experiences with my friends in the park. Magic Kingdom was awesome
Okay.
to be friends there, but I did really also enjoy working in Hollywood studios. Hollywood studios I didn't get to do as often. So when I did, those were special days. But even as a fan, like if I only have one day, and I've done different parks on different days. It's usually a toss-up between am I going to Epcot or am I going to Magic Kingdom? Like if I only go
Hmm.
for a day, because I do have some moments where just because I'm visiting Courtney where I might only get one day to go to a park, it's usually going to be Magic Kingdom or Epcot.
Yeah.
But I love Hollywood Studios. They've
The
just been under refurbishment a lot that I feel like
yeah.
now and then
They
their attraction list needs to get longer to be there for a whole day for me now. Um, but probably Magic Kingdom is probably my favorite.
if I'm there for a day, it's Magic Kingdom as well. And usually sometimes it will be like Magic Kingdom, and then in the evening I'll take the monorail over to Epcot because I love
Hmm.
riding the monorail also. Now it could be start at Magic Kingdom, go to Epcot, then take the Skyliner because I absolutely love the Skyliner. You could
Skyliner's
take the
great.
Skyliner over to Hollywood Studios for a few
Yeah.
little bit, and then back and end at Epcot. That is a pretty neat ending. Um, okay, out of any park you've been to, favorite attraction?
Favorite attraction. Ah. Like these questions are coming, but it's still so hard to pick one. Um, I've got a lot of things. I've always loved. So as a kid, I'm gonna cheat. I have a couple different answers. As a kid, Big Thunder Mountain was my favorite. I still enjoy Thunder Mountain. I love that attraction. Because of Courtney, now I very much love Space Mountain more than I did before. But I always loved Big Thunder Mountain as a kid. But I also like Rise of Resistance is just incredible. Like if I need to tell someone you need to go on one attraction to get a sense of like what Disney does in an attraction, and you only get to ride one, I think I'm going to send you to Rise of Resistance because you've got the cast member interaction
Hmm.
of the First Order and the Rebellion, moving you from place to place. You've got so much show. You have the innovation of the technology is insane. It's dark ride and it's screen. It's just everything that Disney does well is all in one attraction at Rise of Resistance.
Yeah.
So I think like if I had to pick like the quintessence, like if you need to go to one, like you only get to ride one ride the entire time you're there, I'm gonna tell you to go there just to get a sense of Disney. But I love all the attractions where you get a lot of cast member interactions, like Jungle Cruise, and I loved Great Movie Ride.
Hmm.
I really do like Runaway Railway, but I do miss Great Movie Ride. I like the ones where you have a lot of cast member interactions.
Yeah. Have you been to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway in Disneyland?
I haven't. So I've only been to Disneyland one time. I went for my 30th birthday, if that tells you anything about fandom. That was my big treat to myself is I wanted to go to Disneyland and they were building it when I
Okay.
was there. So Toontown was closed and I was devastated at the time because that was what I missed Toontown so much. I loved Toontown. Storybook Circus is amazing. The theming is great. Dumbo having pretty much like a set theme is
Hmm.
incredible. But I loved Toontown. You got to meet Mickey and Minnie at their homes. Like that was
Yeah.
amazing. And that was their summer home. Florida was their summer home, not their home. So I was really looking forward. Like I wanted to go to Toontown so bad. But it was closed. So I need to go back. I need to go
So
back. I know it's slightly
this,
different, like the theming of how you go into it, with their like the Toontown movie theater versus the Chinese theater.
yeah,
Um,
it it is when you walk into that. We went last summer, and the coolest thing, the rides are the same. The queue in the Chinese theater is really, really cool because it's the Chinese
yeah,
theater and everything. And you see the posters of coming attractions and everything. When you go at Disneyland, there are um in the queue area, they have set up like the props from Mickey's movies.
yeah,
And I told you about the stormtrooper interaction earlier. This is one of my another favorite memory, and it's with my youngest son. We're walking through the queue, and like it has like the desk that he sat in uh Mickey's Christmas Carol, and like the
Yeah.
suit he wore and like his dance videos and things like that.
Ah, that's so cool.
And we're walking past one, and I think it was the costume, and I can't remember Mickey and the it's the story of Prince of the Pauper. I can't remember the name of
Yeah.
it. Um, and my youngest son said, "Is that really what he wore?" And
Oh,
just all at the same time, just this wave of emotion came over me. I'm like, as an adult, it's so cool to be able to go and suspend reality
yeah.
and live in the space that, yes, like this is what
He
Mickey
wore that.
wore, or this is what Mickey sat at, knowing full well, like, what we know as adults. Hearing my son say that, I was like, this is it. Like,
Hmm. Very
this is
cool.
this is the cool thing that like he's saying that, and in a few years he'll probably be embarrassed like by that story, I know, but
Yeah.
like I'll always get to have that story and get to have that interaction. It's so
And that's
so
why
cool
I
to
enjoyed my role so much because I had those interactions with people of kids who haven't like there is no suspension of disbelief.
yeah,
It is total belief. But then I also had people who like, yeah, you might know better, but they buy into it. I've
yeah,
had people who are just as emotional to meet Mickey at in their elderly years, as I did with kids who were meeting Mickey for the first time. And that's
yeah,
what's so powerful and so great about these stories and these characters is how people connect to them. So yeah, even in a setting and in a queue, if that happens, that's
yeah.
incredible.
Well, and there, even like you were talking about the power of the characters, and this is off topic a little bit, but when it was actually after the tsunami in Japan, when they opened up Disneyland again, and people could go, and Tokyo Disneyland, they could see, um, people talked about the impact of seeing Mickey again and being able to
Hmm.
hug Mickey again, and just being kind of this sign of like everything is going to be okay. And
Yeah.
so that's, those interactions are extremely important. Um, Anywhere you either have stayed or haven't stayed yet, do you have a favorite hotel?
Polynesian. I
Okay.
love the Polynesian resort. We've had days where I'm incredibly fortunate that I get to go to Disney as often as I do, mostly because of my good friend Courtney, because she lives there, and I have also a family that lives in Florida that I have places to stay that I don't have to stay in a
Hmm.
hotel, and that makes that a lot more affordable. But then also when I'm visiting family, I'll just tack on an extra day and pop over to Disney for like
Yeah.
one day. And we've done days where we don't go to parks at all. We just go to resorts.
Hmm.
And we, when I say we, me and my partner, we love the Polynesian resort. We did a whole day there once where we literally ate at every restaurant. We ate at Captain Cook's. We ate at um, Kona Cafe. We went to Trader Sam's. I got a Dole Whip from the Dole Whip bar walk-up window, and we went to Ohana. We went to
Okay.
every single restaurant. We watched the fireworks from the beach. We just hung out there
Nice.
all day, and we weren't even staying there. And we just love it, especially for
Yeah.
watching fireworks. That's my like go-to tip for people when they're like, especially with young kids or it's their first time going to parks. I know waiting for fireworks for some people. I know my crowd tolerance is a lot higher than other people's. And the crowd to watch fireworks can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
My boyfriend is not a fan of crowds. He puts up to it with it because he's like, I know you love this and I'll be okay. But I know it's not his favorite thing in the world. So we'll balance out where, hey, let's go watch the fireworks, but we're gonna go watch them from the Polynesian resort where they'll
Yeah.
pipe in the music. And then we get to watch the electrical water pageant right after.
Yeah.
And he's really enjoyed that he can I get to enjoy my Disney, but he gets to do it in a much calmer setting.
Yeah.
And there's people around, but it's not nearly as crowded as like Main Street. And I tell people that all the time, like, oh, you're going with kids, but you only got one day in the park. Well, you can go watch the fireworks from a resort for
Yeah.
free. Just do it. And it's awesome, especially the Polynesian.
Yeah.
So I love that resort. My goal one day is to split a bungalow with like family and have all of us stay at one of the bungalows. One day it'll
Yeah.
happen. One day.
Favorite restaurant anywhere on property. That could be Disney Springs also,
Oh
or downtown
goodness.
Disney in
There's
California.
so much food. We are a food family. So like when we would plan our vacations, we planned around the food. Where did we get reservations? Was the day you went to that park. There was no
Okay.
like we always do Magic Kingdom first. No, it depended on where we got reservations. I would say right now my favorite is going to be 50s or sci-fi. I love the
Okay.
restaurants in Hollywood Studios just because the high theming is amazing. Food wise though, I'm obsessed with Sanaa
Okay.
up in over at Animal Kingdom Lodge. We went because we were told. My partner and I, we were like, okay, and you get to see the animals in the savannah. The bread service, 100% worth it. Some of the best food that I've had on property was there. It is a much more elevated dining experience, I will say, price wise. So it's not something that's always on our list. Um,
Yeah.
but I like the ones with the theming, and I do like character dining. I will say, working, my favorite restaurant that I worked at was probably a toss-up between Chef Mickey's and Garden Grill
Okay.
were two locations I worked the most. Crystal Palace was fun, but it's a greenhouse. It's a little toasty in there.
It gets a little,
Uh,
yeah.
it gets a little toasty in there. And Pooh and Piglet are a little round in the middle, and those tables are packed in pretty tight. So it's a great place. I highly, highly, I tell people all the time with kids, I guess another hack is um the best way to meet characters is to do character dining.
Yeah.
Um, it's the best place to do it because they come to you. And
Yeah.
I loved working those experiences. They're really fun and they're much more organic than waiting in line to meet somebody.
Yeah.
They can be a little bit more fun and playful, and you get to see them sometimes multiple times, so they get to know you throughout. You're there for like an hour to 2 hours, so
Yeah.
characters get to know you, which is really fun. But Crystal Palace, it was just a little tight in there. Um, Working wise, but still very enjoyable. But Chef Mickey's was a lot of fun just because there's a dance party in the middle of it. So
Okay.
that was really fun. So enjoy Chef Mickey's. Um, I do miss Liberty Tree Tavern being, I was like, I wanted to work there so bad. Liberty Tree Tavern's no longer a character location, but I loved that as a kid.
Yeah.
So those were fun places
Favorite
to work.
favorite treat.
I'm a salt person. I'm Team Mickey pretzel,
Okay.
and it does taste better as a Mickey pretzel shaped like Mickey. Maybe that's also my South Jersey, Philadelphia roots that I just love a soft pretzel. Um, but yeah, I'm Team Mickey pretzel.
Okay.
Sorry, mom. My mom's is the ice cream fan. I like the ice cream, don't get me wrong, but I'm gonna go grab that Mickey pretzel probably first.
I had not had I used to have the Mickey ice cream bar, which now you can get in stores, which is great and
It still doesn't
dangerous.
taste as good.
Um, it doesn't, but
It's close.
it's close. Um, I had not had a Dole Whip until our trip in I think 2019 or maybe.
Yeah,
And now I probably have like
I
six or
do.
seven every trip that I go.
That's my sister's favorite. She has a tattoo of a Dole Whip on her back with the orange bird. Um, she loves that.
Yeah,
Surprisingly, the first time I ever had a Dole Whip was actually at the Denver Zoo, not in Disney. Even when I
yeah.
worked there, Dole Whip was not something I got. I finally had one at the Denver Zoo in like 2019. And then I was like, I'm an idiot. I've been missing out on this, and I love them. And actually, the ice cream place 2 blocks from me here in Frederick, Maryland, they sell Dole Whip, and it makes me
Really?
so happy. From a soft serve
Yeah.
thing as well. It's not like the Dole Whip that I think now I sell them at like Costco or Walmart or something you can buy. That is not, I wasn't
That's
impressed.
yeah,
In
that
the cups, it's like too condensed. It's not soft enough.
yeah.
Um,
Our Costco only sold them for a little bit. Because
I
I
got
don't
them and I
think
tried
they
them and I was not
yeah.
happy with it.
But
But
it
the
is
one I got here from my local ice cream place tastes exactly like the park.
when that's one that if I know there is a Dole Whip somewhere, I will go get it. Like we were in
They're
St.
so
Louis
good.
last summer, and the St. Louis Zoo has Dole Whip also. So like
Hmm.
I walked around trying to find that, and then my family lives in the Austin area, and so there's one of the ice cream store, one of the uh, snow cone places there just started serving it. So I did get to have Dole Whip
But
this
then you just
summer. That
gotta
was
pull up the
nice.
Adventureland soundtrack and just let that play while you're eating it
Yeah.
to get closer to the park
Yeah.
experience.
So these last three are based on like our conversation. They're
Okay.
more specific to you. So when you were in the college program and friends of characters, do you have, you don't have to say the most meaningful interaction or
Hmm.
favorite character that you ever got to be friends with, but do you have a meaningful interaction or multiple interactions that
Oh,
you'll
so
remember
many.
for a long time?
Um, Two immediately popped in my head. Three immediately popped in my head. My first ever day on my own, I was friends with Pooh in the Hundred Acre Wood in Magic Kingdom, and a little girl brought me a pot of honey. I still have that pot of honey in my keepsake box. Um, so many great interactions with people that way, but other two that really stand out, was friends with Donald in Mexico with the Three Caballeros, and Donald asked me to join him to lead the mariachi band out.
Mm,
So there's a great video that I have of Donald and I with the mariachi band, which was really fun. So getting to play, like just play around, was a good
yeah.
time. Um, and another one, this one's a lot more emotional. Mickey invited me to hang out with him at Ohana for breakfast. And this was a location that I didn't get invited to very much. Ohana, I only worked maybe two times. Um, Stitch never asked me to hang out with him. It was always Mickey, before you ask. So there was a family there, and there was a specific request that Mickey go to this table to meet with a woman, very elderly, wheelchair, probably in her mid 90s. She was quite elderly. And it was explained to me in a way that it was pretty well known this was going to be her last trip to Disney. And the one thing she wanted was a trip to Disney World with her family, and she wanted to see Mickey. Like that was her number one request. So I brought her a lei and I hung out with her family for a good 20 minutes at that table. And again, at 90 some years old, she was so excited to see Mickey. I'm gonna cry right now thinking about it. And that was a meaningful interaction for me to understand the staying power that these
Yeah,
characters have for people. It sustained her, not like sustained her whole life. There's lots of things in your life that make your life meaningful. Um, but that was something that she's like she knew she did not have much time left. And she wanted a trip to Disney World
yeah,
with her family. Her great grandkids were with her. Like there were three or four generations of people at this table. And she wanted Mickey there more
that's
than anything.
cool.
And her face when Mickey came over to the table was something I will never forget. It was a beautiful moment. Mickey needed a little bit of a break after that.
Yeah, that's
Needed a couple tissues. Um, and I Mickey made sure he popped by that table a few times before they left. But that interaction particularly stands out. Um, and it was a great day.
that's really really cool. That's a thanks for sharing that. The the next one is about Book of the Mouse Club.
Yeah.
Again, you don't have to say favorite. I don't want to put you in an awkward
Oh,
position.
so many good
Um,
books.
do you have some books, excuse me, do you have some books that have really stood out to you through the work of the podcast?
Yeah, plenty. I'm gonna look at my bookshelf to kind of trigger my memory a little bit. Um, I mean, Dream It Do It was our first episode, so that holds a special place for me. Is also the first time I really dove into Disney history outside of like the park opened October 1st, 1971. So like hearing from Marty Sklar, I actually got to meet Marty. I bought that book and he signed it when he was signing them in Disney Springs that day. So that was important. That was cool for me. One that particularly stands out though, episode wise, when we got to meet and talk with Kevin Rafferty.
Okay.
We had read actually someone who you talked to, Brett Nachman. We're also friends with
Hmm.
him. We read his book together, Magical Journey, um, and did a podcast about it. And then we're like, let's see if we can get an interview. Shoot our shot. And they were like, sure. And we were shocked. We're like, oh my gosh, we get to talk to an Imagineer, like someone who works
Yeah.
for Disney. Like people know Kevin Rafferty. At least in the Disney sphere, you say Kevin Rafferty, people know who that is. Um, Maybe one day we'll get Joe Rody and then I'll just die. But that one stands out to me because it's the interview where we had the most parameters. They're like, you have 20 minutes. There's going to be someone from WDI also on the call monitoring. So we were
Hmm.
nervous. We're like, we've got 20 minutes. We had like 7 questions laid out about his book and about his career, but we knew we might only get through like 4 of them. So we had to rank them because we're like, we want to have plenty to talk about in case he talks quickly, but what do we do? And it was during COVID. We did that interview while I was between classes. So I was teaching that day, and we did that interview on my lunch break. And I was like, I also have to get to class on time. But we had so much fun talking to him. So that one stands out, along with Margaret Carey, Tinkerbell Talks.
Okay.
She wrote this book in her 90s about her
Yeah.
time. She was the model for Tinkerbell, and she has a whole career in like Hollywood radio and acting and dance in like 1950s, 60s Hollywood, which is incredible. And she was such a pleasure to talk to. There's so many good books.
Yeah.
But those particular interactions are jumping to the forefront of my brain right now. But we've had such a cool time getting to talk to like DDA Getz was a lot of fun. He was very nice and sent us a copy of They Drew as They Pleased. And that was really cool to get into that. And then I bought all of the rest of the books. I now
Yeah.
have the full 6 volume set. So that's cool when one book leads you to another, which leads you to another.
Yeah.
And you can see my library has grown a lot from that. And then also Kingdom Keepers. We had a lot of fun. Our
Yeah.
first summer series, we read the full Kingdom Keepers, and uh, we got to talk to Ridley Pearson after for a different book for Cautionary Tales. But that was a lot of fun. That was the first time we did like a summer series, and we were like, oh, we should do a theme every summer because we did that whole series in one summer, and then now we have our summer series we do.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool too. Sorry, I know you
Very
asked me
cool.
for like one, and then I
No,
say like
no,
seven.
that's well, you said you've read my book, chapter, I think it's 14. I list like 7 things for everything. So
Eh,
it
we
doesn't
play by our
matter.
own rules.
Um we an interesting point about Ridley Pearson, he was the last person to visit live with the class via Skype before lockdown.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
he actually November or February 2020, he was the last person to like be in class. The audio's horrible, the video's horrible because it was like shaking and the signal was not great in the classroom. And then after that, when lockdown, that's when I just started doing these types of interviews. So I was lucky enough to have him come back and like the, talk about cautionary tales and again about just kind of me kind of fan out on Kingdom
I think you
Keepers.
mentioned
But
it in your book too. Something else I keep waiting for from a D23 Expo. I want a Kingdom Keepers like TV show.
yes,
Give us a
I
Disney Plus series. Kingdom Keepers
I
would be incredible.
I had so much hope when Disney Plus was brand new. And at various points, there have been rumors that one would be in development. And actually, what I've heard is there's so much IP in it, even though it's all Disney IP, there's so much IP that like it would be difficult to do for whatever, even though it
Yeah.
all is Disney
Well, he ended
IP,
up
but
he ended up rewriting the series to
yeah,
update the attractions because some of the attractions in the original Kingdom Keepers don't exist anymore.
yeah, yeah.
And like I can't
So
imagine what that was like to have to go back and rewrite your books to do that.
and the second time he joined, he talked to me. He talked a little bit about that. Like one book he had to rewrite this much. One book it was almost like the whole book he had to like. Very very interesting. I had to go back and kind of keep up
Yeah,
with
so I do see
with
the
all that.
challenge that
Yeah,
Disney could be
yeah.
facing. Like, is that something that you just reconcile that 10 years from now, half that show might be obsolete, but
Yeah.
I think
It's
people would love it. It'd be so good.
it's almost like I want to have a conversation at some point about how um the the Disney Plus original movie Rescue Rangers got made because you when you talk about IP,
Yeah, there's a lot
I
in
mean,
that.
and it was like modern day um Who Framed Roger Rabbit as far as
Yeah.
like I would love to speak to like the legal department about how they got everything approved to have like you know all of that. But so all right, the last question. This is based on your your love of history, working with
Hmm.
the archives, and what we talked about with National Treasure. Let's say there is an announcement made at D23 that National Treasure 3 is being made, but also there is a National Treasure attraction that is
Ooh.
going to be added to the parks. And you are the one, they ask Emily how to design it, where it should be. What is your idea for a National Treasure
Ooh.
attraction?
Oh, this is so good. Um, ah, okay. Kind of two things pop through my head. If we're going more classic National Treasure, I'm gonna go with Liberty Square. You go to Hall of Presidents, but there's another entranceway.
Hmm.
And maybe it's a secret attraction. You need to know where the entrance is. Like think Freemasons, hit this button, hit that button, and that's where you know where this attraction is. Um, and then having a whole, I don't know if it'd be a I don't think it would work as a dark ride. I'm thinking maybe a roller coaster. So let's pretend there's more space in Liberty Square than we give it credit for. Um, but maybe something to that extent of
Okay.
you have a secret entrance way. Maybe through there is a museum exhibit in
Hmm.
Hall of Presidents. So maybe through there's a way into it. Um, or this is one that I've armchair imagineered a lot of times. World Showcase. Even if you did a national treasure like I think an attraction could work, but also if you did, all those different games that you play
Hmm.
around the world, I think you could easily make a national treasure one as
Yeah.
well. And having artifacts and history from different countries all linked together. Maybe it ends in American Adventure or it starts in American Adventure and sends you around the world. There's so many IPs and things that I think lend itself to doing something around World Showcase. And I'm a fan of the more things you can put in World Showcase that makes you go in and out of those pavilions, the better.
Yeah.
Um, or having it start an American Adventure, maybe go from there. Maybe that's it. Epcot's got a lot more space. So maybe same idea, something built off of American Adventure into National Treasure. But I think you could also make a very easy, like deciphering codes around World Showcase and
Yeah.
have some artifacts that you learn from, some history that interconnects around the world would be really cool.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, if it ever happens, I would be there for it. So,
Oh, it'd be so
um,
cool. I'm hoping maybe after talking about it today, we'll have that announcement in the next 48 hours
yeah.
of a new
Yeah.
national treasure. Knock on wood.
Emily, thank you for joining me. This was really, really cool. It's a really, really fun conversation. For anybody who wants to follow you, wants to learn more about Book of the Mouse Club, what's the best way to do that?
So best place, you can find me on Instagram at Emily_McD. It is a private account, but you can request, and I just look over everyone's. If I see something even vaguely Disney about your account, I accept you, because I'm assuming you're a listener or part of the fandom. Um, but Book of the Mouse Club, you can follow us at Book of the Mouse. Instagram is the main place that we post like what our upcoming books are. Um, you can also email us at Book of the Mouse Club if you have a book that you want to recommend. But Instagram, Book of the Mouse is where you can mostly find our information and what we're doing. Our next book, we just finished our summer Adventureland attraction series. So we did Jungle Cruise Skipper stories, we did Enchanted Tiki Room history, as well as This Was Family Treehouse. And we are moving next into an author interview and a Disney book called the Disney in between. The year, I think it's 1966 to 1986, by Steven Anderson, looking at kind of that time period when the Disney Studios was trying to figure out what to do after Walt passed and what brings us into the Renaissance era. So that's going to be our next book, and hopefully
Okay.
people will read along with us. You can read, or you can just jump in and listen, and maybe that'll inspire you to read the book. You can kind of listen any way that you want.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Emily. As I said, I learned a tremendous amount. I really, really enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day.
Great, thank you so much.